Oklahoma Newsroom, you're watching the Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson. I'll be joined by Barry Trammell. We're brought to you by Papa John's Pizza. You can go online anytime and order your pizza at papajohns.com. Barry's on the phone. He's joining us from Syracuse, New York, where he is to cover the OU men in their NCAA tournament action. And Barry, let's do our inbox segment. We've got all sorts of questions here answered on video. We'll start with Bill. Bill says, do you expect to see the OU football team in some form of black uniform this fall as part of their protest? Barry, the ongoing saga of the SAE viral video, what about a black uniform?
Well, I do not think that you will see it, although I think the players would like it. And I believe that the administration will, in all likelihood, nix that idea. It's a situation where I think the players would like to make that protest. However, I think the outrage by fans, the fan base would be pretty alienated by black uniforms. I think it'd be a PR disaster. I don't think we'll see it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but I do think that you can expect to see, if you see any sort of post-practice interviews on camera or pictures of players at practice, I think they're likely to be wearing something in the way of black jerseys at practice, Barry. They've done that as they've returned to the practice field this spring for spring football. So I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know what sort of form that will take, but I wouldn't be surprised to see these guys continue to wear those practice jerseys that are black, or shorts or pants or helmets or whatever comes to pass. And then, you know, I think when it comes to game day, you may see guys, a lot of these guys will write things on wrist tape and ankle tape and things that, you know, you may only catch a glimpse of in a still photo, or if you get really close to one of these guys, you may see some of those sorts of things on tape and maybe even written on eye black. But as far as something you know, team-wide, I'm with Barry. I don't think they'll probably do that, but this is something I expect we'll continue to hear about as these guys talk about it, you know, from now to the time being. All right, Barry, let's get back to the inbox, and Chad has a question for us. He says, 5 years ago, college basketball changed from guard play to forwards as a key in winning the NCAA tournament. An interesting point here, Barry.
Yeah, you know what? It may have been even longer than that. I think what he's saying is the age-old notion that guards win in the NCAA. Well, I mean, we're not saying they don't win. Mm-hmm. However, you need more than guards. I think, you know, here's the way I look at it. Great guard play will get you past the first round and sometimes to the Sweet 16. But if you want to make the Final Four, you better have some forwards. You better have some front court guys that can do some damage. That's really what separates. Think about it. It separates mid-majors from majors. It separates the elite teams in the major conferences from just the good teams in the major conferences. So front court help. That's why it's so important for Tayshaun Thomas and Ryan Spangler to play well for Oklahoma. You've got to have front court dominance.
Yeah, because I think anymore, Barry, it seems like the true big man in college basketball has largely gone away. Now, Kentucky and teams like that, they buck that trend a little bit, getting the best of the true big men, you know, the 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot. Maybe they can convince them to stay for a year before they go to the NBA, but the NBA has siphoned so many of those guys away, you just don't see true centers. So that's where forwards, and maybe, you know, whether they're very athletic forwards or a little bit taller forwards that can have their way. That's why a team like, you know, Wisconsin is so interesting with, you know, their front court being as big as they are, sort of a match to Kentucky. But I think you're right, Barry. I think guys like Tayshaun Thomas, Ryan Spangler can be game changers in the NCAA tournament, where there aren't as many teams with bigs like those guys, and there really aren't many with the likes of Kentucky and Wisconsin. All right, back to the inbox. This one comes from Bob. Bob says, on this Thunder team, the way they're coached, who would be easier to replace, Russell Westbrook or Kevin Durant? Barry, interesting question here from Bob. I don't think the Thunder wants to replace either of them, just to get that on the record.
No, and you know what? I don't know what difference the way they're coached. I don't know how that affects anything. But one thing we've learned, I think, here in the last, this season, is that it actually would be easier to replace Durant than it would be to replace Westbrook for a couple of reasons. One, we know that Westbrook has the capability of being a dominant defender Durant really does not. We know that Westbrook can carry a team even when everything's falling down around him. We've seen him do that in recent weeks. Durant can do it, but it's more difficult for Durant because he's not a point guard. So, as crazy as it sounds, I think the Thunder would have a better chance of persevering without Durant than without Westbrook.
You know, it's such an interesting question, too, because I'm sitting here thinking about what Westbrook is doing without Durant, but he's also doing it without so many other guys. And where we saw Durant play last year without Westbrook, he essentially had the rest of the guys around him. Now, it was a different team. I still tend to think that you would rather replace Russell Westbrook than Kevin Durant, because I think there are serviceable point guards, definitely nobody as dynamic as Russell Westbrook that you could get if you're the Thunder, but guys that play the point pretty well that could figure out a way to get the ball to Kevin Durant. I think your point on defense is spot on, Barry. You're definitely trading some potentially good defense for not very good defense if you give up Westbrook over Durant. But clearly, I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago when the Clippers came in here and blew through the Thunder, how Chris Paul, how disgruntled he was in New Orleans before he was traded to the Clippers because he just didn't have that talent around him. I know Westbrook is a different guy, but even at that, a point guard really likes to have some guys around him. So I think at some point, you know, Russell Westbrook's frustration without Durant could bubble over, and if it was going to be a long-term thing, like Durant was no longer here, I don't know. I think that you have to give it up to Russell Westbrook. I just don't know that you want to see him long-term without a really good sidekick like Kevin Durant. All right, back to the inbox one last time from Robert. Robert says, I'm happy for Lon Kruger. He deserves this tournament run. I do wish he was a better game manager, but the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. What about that, Barry?
Oh, I thought this was interesting because I never thought of Lon Kruger as a poor game manager.
Yeah.
You know, the Sooners have lost a few close games this year, but now they've started winning some close games down the stretch. So I can't, you know, there's not a lot I can pin on Lon Kruger's game management. So I think he's been an excellent coach in every regard for Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you know, I know that he manages things maybe different than some other coaches. I think Ryan Aber, our OU beat writer, wrote about this a few weeks ago, that Lon generally doesn't take timeouts. He lets his team play through tough stretches, which may sort of put some fans, maybe like Robert, a little bit on edge to say, hey, why don't they slow down this run and get a timeout and get regrouped? Maybe that's where some of the frustration lies. But you know, what Robert said about the positive outweighing the negatives, absolutely. Let's remember where this OU team was when Lon Kruger took over. It was coming out of the disappointment of Kelvin Sampson, him leaving, and then leaving in his wake a mess with the NCAA. Jeff Capel comes in, never really connects with the fan base, brings in a bunch of guys who are short timers, and then leaves more problems NCAA related. So this was a program that was really on the skids, not looking good, and Lon Kruger now has them back to respectability consistently. Might be able to get all the way to the Final Four because they're in a regional now where the seeds above the Sooners are gone. So that would just be remarkable. He's done it without any sniffs from the NCAA, any sort of issues in that regard. So talking about positives outweighing negatives, that's a big outweighing when it comes to Lon Kruger and his Sooners. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.